Welcome everyone. I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Alexia van Schaardenburg. Usually people call me Alexia because it's easier. For a long time I worked in the corporate world, and then I went back to my original interest, which were people, a couple of years ago, and I retrained. And I now do psychotherapy and coaching. And the reason I've decided to organize this bullying talk is because the way that we see situations in, the approach that I use, the way we see situations, is we tend to focus on how a problem is maintained as opposed to why a problem occurs. And the way of looking at things is particularly powerful when it comes to resolving whether harassment or bullying situations, because harassment in the workplace actually works the same as bullying. They have the similar mechanisms. And I thought it would be an interesting topic to share with everyone. And actually, incidentally, after being trained, I was in contact with bullying on a personal note, because my son last year, when he was in grande section, he was around 5 at this time of year, started to have some, experience some bullying himself. And so I had the opportunity to basically crash test the approach to see how effective it would be, and it was very effective. And so I was really happy because not that he was bullied, but that in September, October of 2014, a woman called Emmanuelle Piquet published this book, which is called Te laisse pas faire. Emmanuelle Piquet is actually trained in a similar fashion as me, which is brief, strategic, and interactional therapy. We look at interactions, so how people tell themselves things, and what do they do as a result, what do they think, what do they say, what do they feel. And then we look at how people interact with others, so they say something to somebody, and then what did that person respond, and as a result what happens. And so we look at wider interactions within what we call a system, so a group. And school is one of the complex systems that we have. And what's specific as well about bullying is that we're not inside the system as parents, we are outside. And so I think that's what makes it scary for us, because it's a system we have no direct control over. And that's where the approach that we use, which is often very indirect, is extremely effective. Because we work with whoever has the problem, and we indirectly basically shape the system so that it reorganizes itself. And so she published this book in September, and I was very happy because she outlines in this book, based on about 10 years experience with children, schools, teachers, what is bullying, how it works, the mechanisms that maintain it, and most importantly, how you solve it. Because, I mean, if everybody's here today, is more to solve it rather than, we kind of all know more or less what it is. And so, before we go into the details of what it is, I'm going to deep dive into the reality of school.
Ça va, Maxime? Ça va? Qu'est-ce que tu fais là? C'est quel jour on est aujourd'hui? On est quel jour aujourd'hui? Prends ton sac. On est lundi. Et lundi, c'est le jour des claques. T'es au courant de ça? T'inquiète pas. Reste là. Reste là. Oh. Si je te le rends pas, tu vas faire quoi? Hein? Qu'est-ce que tu vas faire? Vas-y, arrêtez là. Quoi, arrêtez? Arrêtez quoi? Hé, reste tranquille là. Regarde, il est juste là. Viens le récupérer. Tranquille. Qu'est-ce que tu regardes? Toi, avance. Ouais, attends, reste tranquille, reste tranquille. Quand tu parles là, regarde. Arrête ta code à tes poches là. Vas-y, tiens, vas-y, prends ton sac. Il bouge de là. Vas-y, dégage. Vas-y, c'est bon, on y va.
Bonjour. Bonjour. Je n'ai pas accompli cet acte, donc, s'il vous plaît, je suis innocent. Chut, s'il vous plaît. Un deuxième exemple. Je me souviens de cette aventure comme si c'était hier. Mais cet événement... Non mais ça va pas, Maxime!
C'est pas moi!
Tu prends tes affaires et tu viens en premier rang. Dépêche-toi. S'il vous plaît, n'en rajoutez pas, s'il vous plaît. On se calme.
Elle était un boulet. Hein.
Alors, je reprends. Nous allons partir d'un autre exemple.
So this is one of the 3 clips of the government official campaign of 2013. There's one that's called l'éclat for obvious reasons because they hit him at the beginning. And there's a few things, a few other films, but I'll go back to the official campaign and the philosophy behind it in a minute. But when you see a film like this, which is very realistic, that's the purpose of the film, you basically have 2 emotions. You feel very scared, because this could happen to your child. If it hasn't happened, this could happen. I mean, this is a teenager, but bullying starts in primary school. It goes crescendo, and it reaches a peak at the end of as the sophistication of social relationships increases. And so you see this, it's like, if you're any parent, it's quite terrifying. You think, this can happen to my child. And the other thing it generates is anger, because you say, something has to be done. You can feel the adrenaline, like, this is unfair, something has to be done, and it's like, Mama Bear comes out, I need to fix this. And that makes complete sense. And both of these emotions, even if they're not pleasant, they're actually very useful. If you're not worried about any of this happening, you wouldn't be looking out for signs in your children, and you wouldn't be maybe attentive to any signs of problem, and you wouldn't be here. And if you wouldn't be angry seeing this, then you wouldn't do anything if your child was bullied. Okay, no, that's life. And so even if these emotions are very unpleasant, if they are manageable and they don't lead you to being scared every day, every minute, and removing the child from school, or hitting the bully's father, the bully's mother, the bully, the head teacher, and the teacher, which is obviously inappropriate anger, that anger is going to get you to do something about it. And so, as parents, it makes a lot of sense to find this uncomfortable, but I think it was I wanted to basically get you into the subject. I wanted to ask you just to think for 30 seconds about your childhood. I know it's a long way, but remember, what were the playground rules at the time? Not the school's rules, but within your peers and your friends, what was the rule? What was going on? And if you remember any situations, whether it was you being bullied, or you bullying, or you not doing anything when somebody was being bullied, you don't need to answer, but it's just more think about, how that was happening and what fixed it or didn't. Just take a few seconds, and I think it helps kind of get into it. What makes you think that this kid's being bullied? He's intimidated. People are, there's two things going on. There's a group of teenagers basically telling him, today is Monday, we hit you. So they're kind of playing with him, and then they're pushing his bag away and telling him to get it, but he can't reach it. And then there's another bullying which is more widespread, softer, well, not for the kid, right? But where it's in the classroom, and it's more or less visible to the teacher, if you've noticed, with throwing the things and whatever. So obviously that's bullying. Did you notice anything specific? This is not a test, right? It's just to get you thinking. Did you notice what is the bullied child attitude? Like, what kind of attitude does he have in both situations? A lot of what you see is his body language is very low profile. So when he's like, they're talking to him, he's not making eye contact. He's not looking at his bully, which is, it's quite logical, right? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with what he's doing. But logically, he's under attack. He's being bullied. This is not the first time, because one of the characteristics of bullying is it's repeated humiliation, teasing, physical or psychological aggression. And so basically this has happened before, and he's not making eye contact. He's kind of waiting for it to stop. He's in a very passive situation, and that's what most bullied people end up doing, for logical reasons, right? They've tried several things which were not effective, and so they kind of end up giving up. Not because they're weak, it's just because they've tried and they have the impression that what they've done is not effective. There was research conducted by the state in primary school, a very extensive research run by some sociologists about they observed school violence. And so the purpose of the report was not to find any solutions. These are sociologists, so they just observed and measured. And what they found is basically 15% of primary school children experience some form of bullying, whether it's physical or psychological, including forced undress or forced kiss. What you need to know is that they estimate it's higher in secondary school, but they don't manage to research in secondary schools because surprisingly children won't participate. We'll see why later. Interestingly enough, theft and racket is lower, but a lot of these kids here are in there. I think it's like 60% of kids being racketed are bullied, which actually makes sense if you think about it. And it's a problem because if you're bullied as a child, you're more likely to be bullied at work, to be a victim of harassment. And if you're a bully yourself, which is not ideal for anyone, you end up more likely to be a delinquent, to do criminal activities, etc., etc. So on both cases, it would be good not to be a bully, not to be bullied, because it has consequences. Because the interpersonal skills that you develop or don't develop, well, you carry them as you go. So, we kind of already covered that it's repeated humiliation. So you've got the bully, who does a certain number of things. And then you've got the vulnerable child, who's trying to deal with it. And we'll cover this and what they're trying to do after, but they usually do things like they say stop, like he does in the film. But you might notice that his stop was like, stop! It's not, like he's saying one thing, but his body's kind of saying, okay. And because they are convinced, by the time they reach, bullying is repeated, so this has probably been going on in the film, it must have been going on, this is like not the second day of bullying. It's very probable that it's been going on a certain number of days, if not weeks, if not months. So at some point they'd say, just it's helpless, I'm just not gonna, so they give up, and it's understandable. They try to protest, and then they go into avoidance mode, so they obviously try to avoid the bully, but they also end up, by avoiding the bully, avoiding a lot of other people, because often the bullies are the popular ones, we'll see in a second. They ask for help, but not always. Whether it's a friend or it's the authorities, the parents. Some people try to ignore the bully when it comes to teasing, for instance, I'm not going to listen to, you're stupid or you're fat or you're whatever. But that doesn't work very long, because what the bully does is just increase the level of bullying until they reach the point where they get the reaction they want. And they hide, so it's same as avoiding. So why is this happening? Like, what is driving this? In school, if you remember your school days, the number one law of the school jungle is popularity. It's not how good you are, how much the teacher likes you. It's do you have friends? How many friends do you have? How much visibility do you have, and how cool you are? And that is the number one currency that overrules everything else. So the law, if you have low popularity, this is George McCoy in Back to the Future. There is a bullying scene in Back to the Future. The lower you are on the popularity food chain, the more vulnerable you are. Because the less popular you are, the more isolated you are. And if you think as the playground as a jungle, if you have a herd of gazelle or antelopes or a herd of zebra, if there's a predator like a lion coming over, they will not go and hit the 5 zebras stick together. They will find a little zebra hiding in a corner just because they like to eat a special kind of leaf, or because they're limping, or because they're a bit older, or because... So they will always go for the person that stands out from the mass, the less gregarious. And so then you can see already how the thing is a bit of a vicious circle. Because if the lower your popularity, the more vulnerable you are. Now, if you think of the people at the top of the food chain, the very popular one, Emmanuel Piquet has actually defined them into 2 groups. One of them is the lady di type. They're very gentle, they're very popular, there's kind of regal air to them. They don't really mean to be mean. Sometimes they are, but just because they're versatile. They're like, you're my friend, no, you're my friend anymore. And it doesn't matter anymore. It's not like they intend to drop somebody off as a friend, it's just that they have other things to do. So worst case scenario, they're indifferent to somebody being bullied. Best case, sometimes they save, like they intervene in a bullying situation. But in most cases, they don't actually do it. The ones that really cause problem, and the characters are female, but it could be a boy as well, is these types. You know what this is? It's Nellie Olsen from Little House on the Prairie. And if you vaguely remember the show, she's always perfectly dressed, prim and proper, very smiley, and she spreads rumors, and she tricks people, and she blackmails some of the other kids. She puts the blame on them. She does all sorts of things. And all of what she does is to maintain her position in the food chain. She rules through fear. And this is your classic bully. Okay, it's not Nellie Olsen, it could be a guy, right? But the general mechanism is they need to maintain their position on a high level, and if they want to be high, by definition, they need somebody to be at the bottom. Because if everybody's at the bottom, at the top, it's alpha, it's a domination power, and somebody will have to submit. So there are a lot of people in the playground who are sitting in between, but there are always people who will give up, who don't have the skills to basically say, you're not putting me down there. And so they very quickly know who they are, and they use them as pawns almost to assert their power. So they'll do things like, girls do a lot of this, they'll do things like, you're my friend, you're not my friend, you're my friend, you're not my friend. Teenage girls do this a lot, even primary school. Everybody, I mean, it's more girls. And the reason they're doing this is because it scares all the others. So let's say they have an entourage of 10 people, then they exclude one, and the other's like, oh no, it could be me tomorrow, so they're even nicer to her. And the one that's excluded, because they're sitting there at that time, all they want to do is go back into the food chain. So they'll put up with this exclusion, and they will, when the leader decides they can be allowed back into the group, there'll almost never any protest. They're not going to say, why did you do this to me, that was really mean, I'm not your friend anymore. If they were doing this, they would not be bullied. Because they got into this situation like, I'd rather be her friend, whatever the costs, than go down the food chain. And some of this is perception. It's very likely that it would not happen. If they said to her, well, I don't like the way you treated me, it would be finished, because they would have gone up a level in the relationship, and they would have been more equal, and the bully would have stopped. Because it's not fun you can't humiliate somebody who's basically saying, okay, go, you know, tell me what you have. But you can humiliate somebody who says, no, don't do this to me, I need you. And so that's basically the general mechanism. And so everything that's happening is driven by this popularity. And so people, you know, this is typical teasing and spreading rumors. There is another film from the government on rumors. And you can see that it spreads, and people just spread it just because it's fun, and because it makes the other laugh, and because it makes them look funny, or make them look informed. And every single kid in the school, they know bullying is bad. You should accept differences. You shouldn't be mean to people. It's against the school rules. You should report it. They all know this. Like, it's not like they've been living in a cave and nobody's ever told them. So why are they not stopping it? Or why are they bullying? Or why are they not intervening? It boils down to one thing. Their priority is popularity. The moral code is secondary. The only time you will get children or teenagers override the popularity code is if either it's an extremely serious situation, but in all cases, the social risk to them is higher than respecting the moral code. They'd rather be punished. They'd rather be, you know, punished 3 times, 4 times. Even a bully, I mean, they will be punished. Some bullies are punished, some bullies end up expelled from one school, then the next school, then the third school, but they keep doing it because at some point, the benefit of the power it gives them is much higher than, yeah, okay, I was excluded from 3 days, cool, I could play on my PlayStation at home, and, you know, I lost a bit of pocket money, but so what? To them, the fear of losing that popularity is much greater, so they have to work, they have to continue what they're doing, at least that's the impression they have, and they're ready to pay the cost. And if somebody else, so in the government campaign, even though the current one, basically the recommendations are very simple. There are, if you're a victim of bullying, whether it's like a primary school, secondary school, whatever, you should do 3 things. You shouldn't try and defend yourself. You shouldn't use violence. you should report it to a grown-up. That's it. You can already see how that's not, and very important, everybody else should intervene. How realistic is this? It's completely ignoring the next slide, which is effectively the playground rules. Problems between kids should be handled between kids. That's not me saying it, that's what children do. After CM1, 9 years old, if you try to intervene directly, you are at very high risk of aggravating the situation. Your child will be seen as a snitch, and his popularity will go down. And the further down it goes, the worse it is. So some kids are really good at dealing with this. They'll get an older kid to intervene. That's a sort of in-between solution. It has advantages because it's within the ecosystem. But it still has limitations, which I'll talk about in a minute. So basically, I want to just go back here. The vulnerable child is telling himself, as I said, I need friends, whatever the cost. I have to have friends. It's important. That's what everybody needs. The parents, with all their best intentions at heart, know that having a network, having friends, it's fun. It's great to be able to play football, discuss PlayStations, whatever. But they also know that from a future perspective, having friends is building a network, is building social skills, so they put, with all the best intentions, a lot of pressure on how many friends do you have. Are you invited? Not all parents, but some parents, as I said, just because they're trying to follow what's important, they're putting a lot of pressure on, are you going to birthday parties? Are such and such invited? You should make sure you're invited, and not all parents like this, but a lot of parents are getting concerned about this, and unintentionally, they are, in some cases, aggravating the situation. That doesn't mean that if parents are saying this, the child will be bullied. That's not what I'm saying. But if the child is already vulnerable, that they're not as socially trained and effective as another, and there's additional pressure on from the parent, then they are at greater risk. Because what will happen is that they will be more willing to accept a relationship of bad quality, and also sometimes they will try and make friends, but it's kind of artificially. Like it's the same, if you remember when we were a teenager, we were trying to be cool. And there were some people in school who were like really cool, and you want, I want to be like him, I want to be like her. So you bought the same clothes and you put on the same makeup. Not everybody does this, right? But and then you say, oh, I have to be cool. And then you try and be cool like them. And obviously what happens is you look stupid. Because it's not natural. And this is what happens if you put too much pressure on you have to be sociable and you have to go and talk to this kid. No. You're kind of forcing a process which more or less should be natural. And then your child becomes awkward, and then the other child feels it's vulnerable, and so it kind of aggravates it. But with all the best intentions. I mean, no parents is basically trying to do this. Yeah.
What about like setting up play dates? Because I see a lot of people talk about bullies on the message board, and they say, because their child's not having a lot of friends, we're going to set up some more play dates and stuff like that. Is that?
I think it's like, it depends how you do it. If it's like, oh, let's have play dates, and your child comes and we let him do whatever he's doing, you're giving him opportunity to meet a lot of people, right? And whether he talks to such and such or not, if it doesn't concern you, you're just putting in, you're favoring interaction, but you're not interfering. Now, if you go and you say, okay, go and talk to such and play with that one, and why don't you two, then you kind of, and sometimes it works. Like sometimes kids, when they don't know each other, they're a bit, like, oh, I don't know you, and then you say, but both of you like Lego or whatever, and then, but then if you leave them to it, they're more likely to kind of say, oh, what Lego do you have, and then they end up playing. But if you sit there and you're saying, okay, so you have to get on, I mean, it would happen to us. If we were stuck with two people, it's like a blind date, except we didn't choose to be on one. Like, here's this person, you have to be nice to each other, and you have, so you're kind of forcing a situation where nobody's going to be natural. So you see what I'm trying to say? Like, if you put in if you're setting up all the environment, you are favoring the fact that it will come out naturally. So it's very ecological. If your son or your daughter doesn't like, then they don't have anything in common, they'll probably say, and then they go and do something else, and no harm is done. But if you're intentionally saying, I'm setting up a play date so that you make more friends, the implicit message you're actually telling your son is, you don't have enough friends and you need my help to find some.
Yes, but I don't think you would say that to your son. I think you would just make the play dates and hope that he gets more comfortable with other kids, and then if they see each other more often outside of school, that they become friends at school. But I don't think you would, I mean, I think that's your point. You wouldn't say that to your child, because why would you say that to your child? I don't see what kind of added benefit that would make.
No, it wouldn't, because it would be counterproductive. Because the more, I mean, some people, it's like it's similar to saying to a child, you should be more confident in yourself. Telling somebody to be more confident doesn't achieve them being more confident, because it just tells them you're not, since you're telling them they should be more. But if you put them in a situation where you know it's something they're not used to doing, and then you say, do it, even if they fail, but you systematically offer them something that they're not at ease with, you are basically telling them implicitly, I think you should be, I'm trusting you to do this. And a lot of it is to do with intervention, which is, I'm going to say in a minute, and then what we've covered is basically everybody has this problem. The bully has the same problem as the other child, it's just that he solves it another way. I mean, the vulnerable child is basically taking in whatever, and the bullying child is saying, I can't stop this, otherwise I lose everything. So everybody is basically suffering. But in the way we look at things, the person we can get to change is the child who's being bullied. The traditional system, the traditional view, has the idea that everything has to be on the bully. If you think of a campaign, the campaign is, tell the bully, sanction the bully, punish the bully, etc. The problem of being gentle parents, to go back to your point, we all want our children to have the best life, to be happy, to have friends, to enjoy themselves, and we also want them to have the least suffering possible. And that's kind of normal, because that's our mission, right? I mean, if we were sitting there going, yeah, I don't want you to suffer, there would be kind of something going wrong with the relationship. And so if you think about it, when our children are small, and they start to, if you think of the time they're starting to walk, you can see they're getting up and they're holding your hand and they're kind of, sort of swaying. And you feel two things. You are very excited, and you're very proud, but you're probably quite scared, not extremely scared, but you're like, oh, maybe he hit his head, or maybe she's going to fall, or she's going to injure. So that you have kind of two things, and you have to find a trade-off between holding her hand permanently, or saying, okay, I might just see what happens if I let her or him try it on their own. And so if you let them a little bit try on their own, within the right time frame, in the right environment, etc., there's obviously the risk that they injure themselves, they fall over flat on their face, or whatever they do when they stop. But there's also the opportunity for them to feel their own balance, and to start thinking, so actually if I put my weight on this leg and I put this other leg, oh yeah, okay, that doesn't work, I've just fallen. But if I do it this way, I don't fall. And this is what most parents do. Progressively they work out that they don't need to hold them so much, and they kind of remove their intervention gradually, so that the child develops their confidence. But, you have parents who hold the hand for a very long time. So maybe you could argue that they walk later, but it works the same with relationships. We don't want them to be in conflicts, we don't want them to be fighting, we think it's much better if they have fun. And so we all do this, we intervene in the sandpit when there's a debate about the spade and the bucket and whatever. They start fighting over Lego, we feel like, we have to do something. But if you think about it, it's exactly the same as walking. If we intervene systematically, we're not giving them the chance to find how they can find their own solutions. And it's all within reason. Obviously, if they're starting to throw sand at each other's eye, and everybody's sort of, it goes completely out of control, then yes, you have to intervene. But in some cases, and everybody's almost experienced this at least once, your child is calling you for some reason, they need you. There's a conflict, they need something, they can't pick up a toy, and then you're busy, I don't know, your hands are filled, or the garbage bin just exploded and you have to clean up. Something that makes it, you cannot come within the 30 second, 1 minute. And then in many cases, what happened, by the time you've cleaned up your hand and done everything and you've come, they found a solution. And then you start thinking, ah, okay, and it switches your perception. So and every parent does this. So on a natural basis, we kind of adjust permanently the level of intervention we have. But because we are very gentle parents, we still have this idea that we have to protect them, they shouldn't be suffering, and it's all well, but in some cases, if we try to protect them too much, it actually makes them weaker. It's a bit like if you never in contact with bacteria, well, the day you are in contact with bacteria, you're extremely sick. If you have several colds, your body starts to train and your immune system gets a bit more equipped. And so when the time you get into a more serious virus, then it's not that bad because you've been kind of facing adversity. And it's all a question of balance. But if your child's being bullied, it's a very scary situation and you're very angry, which is all perfectly normal. But then, first reflex is mama bear, I'm going to solve this. And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's your job to kind of intervene. But the problem with doing that, as you've kind of deduced by now, or partially, is that by intervening, you're achieving several things. The first thing is saying, it's a very positive thing, I care about you. It's the same with school. If school tries to help somebody being bullied, they obviously do this because they care. It's not because it's because it's not acceptable and they want to resolve the situation. So they're sending one message is we care about you. The problem is they're sending a couple of other messages which are not so good. And the first message they're sending to the child who's being attacked is you can't handle this alone. Because if you're intervening, you're not saying to them, I'm going to help you. It's like, I'm going to do it for you. The second message you're sending to the bully is, you really picked your right person. Because they're really so socially, not incompetent, but less equipped, that, look, I have to intervene. So it's the perfect person to bully. And you're sending them another message, which is effectively, only adults can deal with you because you're so powerful. And remember, a bully wants to be on top of the food chain. What better criteria to be popular than to say, haha, look, they need the mediator, the headmaster, and the rectorat to deal with me. God, I'm really something. And the third thing that happens is all of this is driving a bullied child to think, whatever I do, I'm helpless, which clearly doesn't help the posture, the way they behave. It's like, well, they kind of resign at some point. And another thing which I think I haven't put on the slide is that if, let's say, you intervene and you say, you are bullying such and such, this is not acceptable, you will be punished, whatever. Yeah, they'll be punished. But in most cases, what it achieves is it goes underground. Somebody recently told me of a girl, and this is in Sydney, who's worked out that she can have fights with other girls in the toilets because nobody goes in the toilets except the kids. She's 6 and she's already worked out that to kind of have her fights in peace, she needs to be hiding. And so the more you intervene, the more you're getting the bully to improve, effectively, which is kind of exactly what you were trying to avoid. Yeah? You're hoping that by telling them stop, they'll say, yeah, okay, you're right, it's wrong, I'm going to stop now. Which, if you think about why they're doing this, makes no sense. And this is why a lot of situations remain and aggravate when adults intervene. What do parents do? And we've covered this already. They ask for the school intervention. My son or my daughter is being bullied, you have to do something. All of this is very logical. Some of them try to contact, in the case of asking the school, you have 2 scenarios. The school might intervene, and it might work, in which case it's good because the bullying has stopped. The only downside is that your child's popularity is down, because he's a snitch, and you've basically told them, I've fixed it for you, so they haven't learned anything except when in trouble, call an adult. So their self-esteem is not improving. In some cases, the school actually refused to intervene because they say, oh, you know, it's just kids playing, whatever. And so it really doesn't achieve anything because it makes the parents rightly more angry, and so they're more likely to escalate, to go to the academy, to go to the directorate, to go to the police, to contact a lawyer, or to contact the bully's parent. And again, in that scenario, you can be lucky, and the bully's parent might be so horrified and so efficient that the bully says, okay, yeah, I'm stopping. But it could also, they could say, oh, this is my sweet little daughter you're talking about. I just don't believe a word you're saying. And so you go back to the scenario where you get more angry, and the bully knows that you've gone to seek help, and you will pay. The child will pay for it. Approaching the bully is exactly the same. It's giving them a lot of importance, increasing their power, and again, it's not helping the child that's being bullied. Because at the end of the day, what's really interesting to us is helping the child not to be bullied. I mean, at the end, bullying, whether he bullies or not, is almost another discussion, right? The priority, as it's your child, your priority is that the bullying stops. And so all of this is saying to the child, let me handle this. You can also change school. It does work in some cases, because the child goes into a new environment, they have different expectations, maybe they behave differently, and they're just lucky and there's somebody weaker. But they still haven't learned anything beyond get help. And in some cases, they change school, and of course it starts again. Because it's not the child that's dysfunctional, it's the way that they respond to attacks, right? So until they learn to deal with the attacks, if they are in that situation, it will start again. And it drives the idea that there's nothing I can do, this is my life kind of thing. And then the fifth one I've mentioned already, the whole ignore them, don't retaliate, blah, blah, blah. It does not work. Because it's unbearable for the child. They're kind of having to hold it all up. And the bully knows, even if they run off to the toilet, the bully knows that they've run out to the toilet. Or they'll just up and up and up the level of what they're saying until basically the child loses it. So it gets worse every time that you ignore it. Because what they want is a reaction. In all cases, they feel helpless and they're not in control. The school logical stuff, as I've said before, the moral code, bullying is bad. Talks, you know, awareness of bullying, if you see bullying, talk about it, whatever. I'm not saying all of this is, they have to do. They can't just say, we're not going to talk about it. But it's not addressing it's not giving tools. And it doesn't take into account the social code of the playground. The fact that popularity will outrule any kind of moral considerations. And they also say don't fight back, which I really have a problem with, but that's just me. I'm not saying that violence should be the first solution, but in some cases, you know, somebody tries is attacking you. Well, if it takes to push them back really hard, sometimes it just solves the problem. So I'm not suggesting people should come to school with knives, right? But I think saying to somebody, you're under attack, don't fight back, for me is kind of weird. Although there are other things to do than, you know, using violence against a bully. We'll see in a second. And tell on bully is the most classic situation. And wait for another child, for me it's like, you know, this is like in Wonderland, it doesn't happen. Or it's extremely unlikely. Mediation, moralize the bully, legal action, everything this is saying, you can't handle this. And the child we've covered, what do? Like in the film, they ask the bully to stop. But if you see there's a disconnect between how they ask and what they say stop. Not very convincing. Ignoring, we said, we've said all this, ask for other help. And another point is they lose control of their emotions. And some kids who are very reactive, they get bullied just for that. Like if you push a kid once and they go, you know, like it's kind of entertaining. So, I mean, this is how it works. And then everybody goes, look, you know, he's like a toy. You press on the button, he makes a noise, let's try again. And so this can generate the bullying situation. So, all of this, and you've seen all the lecturing doesn't work. What really works for children to learn something is they have to experience the social and emotional consequence of what they do. You can lecture them all you want about bullying being bad. If there's no social or emotional cost to bullying, Not going to work. And this actually works for any kind of learning. So, okay, I've told you all of this, now you have to be depressed. What are we going to do? There are solutions. It's called, well, she calls it, and I think it's a good analogy, interpersonal judo. When you're not familiar with martial arts, but judo is basically using the opponent's strength against them. So I've never practiced judo, but the idea is that you use whatever they're trying to attack you and you turn it around. So it's more like it's like a boomerang. You throw something so that it goes back.
It's the kinetic energy. No. Okay. Movement. Yeah.
And so this is our proposition for fighting with bullying. So brief interactional therapy principles is basically based on the idea that something becomes a problem when whatever solutions you've put in place fail to resolve it. So a kid comes up, pushes you once, you tell them, no, that's not a problem. It's finished. They do this every day, and every day you go, oh, stop, and it's not working. I'm going to tell the teacher, and that doesn't work. And we've covered all of what the child does, and they explore everything, which is effectively a mix of stop but not really. Like, you can stop, but there won't be any consequences for me, socially. So that becomes a problem. And the way that we see the world is that the solutions the person puts in place not only don't solve the problem, but they aggravate it. And in the case of bullying, you've seen that the more you kind of say stop meekly, you're kind of saying, okay, you can continue. The more you ask for help, the weaker you feel and the weaker you look. So that's not going to work. So the idea is to stop whatever you're doing, which is not productive, and replace it with the opposite. So you're going to say, she's crazy. It consists of telling the bully to bully. Bully me, please. Well, it's effectively what I'm going to say, but with some refinement. So the idea is not to say, please bully me, and I'm very happy about this. But it will be something like, you can continue to bully me, but there will be consequences. And a bullied child is very afraid. Right? They are very afraid of losing further social position or further popularity. They're afraid of telling their parents because their parents will try and intervene. They're afraid that their parents will be disappointed in them because they're being bullied, and bullied kids are not the tough ones and the popular ones. But basically the idea is to find a solution, and I will walk you through. And that comes with modifying what you say and how you say it, and what actions you do. Because it's basically three. If you remember the film, at the beginning of the sequence, he's telling them to stop like this, which is clearly saying two things. My mouth is saying stop, my body's saying I'm kind of given up. And similarly in the classroom, he's kind of containing himself until he explodes, and then he looks stupid, and then he gets punished. So it needs to be modified so that they take back some control over what's going on, because at this point they have no more control, and they are convinced that's for life. So how can you help your child? Let's be practical. First, you have to, if you've intervened in the past, you have to regain their trust by saying, okay, I understand that in the past you've mentioned you had a problem in school. I made a mistake, I intervened myself, I realized now it wasn't a good idea. Whatever you tell me now, if I ever do anything, it will be with your consent. And if you say that, you have to do that. I know it's obvious, but when you get very upset and very angry, it's hard to say, you want to do something. Change your attitude. Instead of saying, you have to do this, or I'm going to do this, become a coach. Like, okay, at the moment, you don't have the skills to fight back this bully. Let's figure out what you can change, and I'll coach you, we'll role play, we'll practice until you're ready to go and deal with him or her. And you're sending already a very different message. You're sending a message like, with my help, you can get to the solution. If your child is being bullied and they've told you, and they now trust you not to intervene, don't be too eager, like, oh, let's work it out, let's find out a solution. They need to take back responsibility, because they've been very passive, they've been taking a lot of things in, and if you remember, it's a U-turn, so they need to move from out of control to back into control. So just say, okay, you know, I'm here. If it doesn't bother you enough, that's fine. You know, I think you should just continue what you're doing. I'm here for you if you need, and you leave it. And you let them come back to you. They have to be the ones who say, Mommy, can you, Daddy, can you help me find a solution? Because the moment they will ask you, they are customers. If you keep pestering them, like, I can help you, I can help you, I can help you, then they're not going to take whatever you're going to ask them to do, and whatever you're going to ask them to do is going to be difficult. But it will not be more difficult than their current situation, which is usually aggravate every day is getting worse. And what you need to do is collect information about what's going on so that you can manufacture your own U-turn. So that means you're going to have to be detective, and you're going to have to collect a lot of information from your child. Take some time to do that. So that involves, and this is all in Emmanuel's book. Emmanuel's book is very practical. She has cases, she starts with, like, she sets the scene, and then she explains everything I just explained to you. And then she works through the process of building what she calls defensive arrows for children, and then she tells you what happened with all the cases she started at the beginning. And so list everything that's been going on. So if you think about the kid at the beginning, you can say every time he goes into the playground, he's kind of avoiding looking where the group of guys is, and they tell him, oh yeah, today's hit day and you're an idiot, and they look at him, and so list everything that's going on so that you get to know the enemy. Because this is a battle plan. I mean, let's face it, this is violent. So it has to be, let's not pretend that, you know, it's not something that is unpleasant. And work out what everything your child has tried. No, what have you done? What have you tried to do? I've tried to tell them to stop. Has it worked? No. What happened when you did? They said this. Have you tried? What else did you do? Oh, I told the teacher. What did the teacher say? Well, they kind of organized this conference about bullying in my class. I said, okay, so what happened? Well, the bully spent the whole time of the conference looking at me like, oh, it's you, and like laughing at me. And then the next day, it was 10 times worse because they knew that I had gone to see, my parents had gone to see the teacher. Find out everything that's going on, very precisely, and identify the overarching theme. So what are they communicating? So a lot of what the kid is doing there is avoiding. He's not looking at them, he's kind of saying stop but not convinced. He's not responding to attacks. And in the classroom, he's not actually doing anything. He's waiting, I mean, stuff is happening, he's not anticipating any of it, he's just kind of saying, okay, I'm just trying to not do anything. So with him, what he needs to do is obviously from do nothing, he has to confront and do something, anticipate. And so it's find the opposite of the theme. I'll give you an example in a minute. And so you have to build a very specific custom plan. So usually it's something to do with the child has no control, they have to go back into having some control. And it has to, obviously it can't happen necessarily overnight, right? Because this can affect them. If they avoid or hide something, including a defect, let's say they're fat, or at least people call them fat. There is no point trying to pretend they're not fat. There is no point trying to pretend that they will not be teased for being fat. They are being teased. So use it. Own your defect. If you can't trip somebody who's lying on the floor, if that person's on the floor, there's nothing you can do. But if you're standing up saying, no, I'm fine, then it's very fun to trip somebody who's trying to be very, proud and proper. But if they're saying, oh no, I'm too weak already, I'm on the floor, it's no fun. So own the defect. The example that was given to me yesterday was a kid who was really very overweight, and he had troubles passing through the lanes of the class, in between the desks. And every time the teacher would call him up to pick up a paper, the whole class would go calling him pigs. That's pretty nasty, and that was, my understanding is it wasn't the only thing. But of course, what did he do? He sort of tried to disappear into the ground. So he was basically advised, and this is oversimplified because you have to do a certain number of things to get them to own that, but the idea was like, okay, you are smarter than them. You know already their weapon. Their weapon is calling you a pig. So anticipate. They think you're a pig, be a pig. So they told the kid to basically take his his paper and go up, I'm a pig. Do you want to be a pig with me? You know, and it sounds ridiculous, but it actually kills. And you can't make fun of somebody who's making fun of themselves. If you self-criticize, nobody can do it better than you. And that was finished. But it takes some courage. So obviously, but when you reach a situation like this, you tell the child there's two solutions. You continue doing whatever you're doing, and it's not going to get better. And they anyway are going to call you a pig. Or you try this, with the risk that maybe they still call you a pig for a couple of days, with the chance that they stop. And usually they do this, but there's an additional layer that needs to be done for them to achieve this. The other problem that makes them vulnerable is like the zebra, because they are so upset and they just hide, so they become less and less popular, and nobody wants to be a friend with the bullied kid. And so it's rebuilding social relations. So it could be in primary school, saying, okay, I'm going to give you a packet of sweets, and tomorrow you're going to be handing out sweets to everyone in the playground. This is not for the other children. They're obviously not going to change dramatically their perception with a sweet. But for the child giving it out, it's starting to get him back into being with people, because he has to hand out the sweets. He's basically moving from like, you know, I'm here, to here's a sweet, and it's getting back, it's just putting it in motion again. And, you know, some kids, one sweet is enough to befriend them. So, nothing to lose. And this is where the parents can really change by their attitude, they can change things. Make them the problem owner. That doesn't mean they should be overwhelmed, like, oh my God, it's up to me to fix it. But you could say, okay, you know, you're the one in the playground, you're the one facing this every day. If I intervene, it's not going to work, but I can help you, and I can figure out a solution if you give me the information. And it's a completely different outlook, because they've spent, until they reach that stage, they're convinced there's nothing they can do. So it changes their outlook. And what Emmanuel says is that 50% of the children that she helps, she designs what she calls a defensive arrow, and 50% of them never use it. So she trains them, she defines the weapon, she does everything with them, but they know now they have this arrow in their kind of arrow thing, I don't know what it's called, I forgot the name. And just the fact that they know that they have an answer to the bully, they come into the playground, you know, they stop sort of trying to go into the wall and sort of, it completely changes their attitude. And then the bullies start thinking, oh, something's changed, maybe this is a bit risky. And in some cases, there's a kid who was a teenager who was really very badly bullied, quite violent. And she worked out the whole plan. And it took her some time because it was a pretty serious situation. But it took 3 weeks. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. This kid was bullied every day. For 3 weeks, the bully was at a distance thinking, maybe that's just not a good idea. And it's all perception. Nothing was said. And then they're like, okay, I'm going to go and check. And they eventually went to see the vulnerable child, and he delivered the thing, and it was finished. And it was something like this kid was being bullied, and they were quite aggressive. I think they were beating him up on a regular basis, etc. And they worked out with Emmanuel, they worked out that the bully was kind of his virility was very important. He wants to be a tough guy, very like, I'm not a faggot, no. And they kind of worked out very precisely what the enemy was like, so you have to know your enemy. And the kid basically said something like, I don't know why you constantly want to touch me, I'm starting to wonder, maybe you fancy me or something. And he deliberately waited for a lot of people to be around and said this extremely loud. It was finished. Because there was a greater social risk for the bully to continue, because what else could he say the next time, than to stop. And that's basically the general idea.
Before I go into a concrete example, I'll just talk about dealing with emotions, because it's very linked. The dominating emotion for children who are bullied is fear, quite logically. They have several kinds of fear. They have the fear of the bullying never stopping and getting worse every day. They're afraid of the consequence of this on their popularity, on their social status, and they're also afraid of what will happen if they tell you, because they know the playground rules. They're not stupid. As I said before, fear is an alarm. It's there to protect ourselves, and in the case of bullying, the children are often paralyzed by this fear because they're just thinking, oh, what? I can't do anything. I mean, it's going to get worse. And so they don't try anything. After quite quickly, they stop trying anything because they're so afraid of what would happen if they did anything. And so they avoid thinking about it, and they use avoidance tactics. They avoid the bully, avoid thinking, ignoring, and it doesn't work. And so as a parent, you can be very helpful by doing a series of things. You can be present, acknowledging their fear, saying, I would be scared. I mean, if I was in your situation, I knew that every day I was going to go into the school and they were going to find me, and I'm going to end up cornered in the bathroom by 3 kids who basically make fun of me. I would be terrified of going to school every day. I don't know how you put up with this. It's terrifying. And don't tell them it's going to get better. It's not going to get better unless they do anything to change what they're doing. And I know it sounds really harsh, but that's already what they're thinking. What they think is it's going to get worse. And they see, because usually it gets worse, because the bully takes more and more power, and the child. And so you say, yeah, it could get worse. What could happen? What would be the worst thing that could happen? And you go there. And this is scary. And this is scary for you, and it's scary for the child. But facing the fear makes you more courageous than avoiding it. Avoiding it makes you panicky. Facing it, by the time you've crossed the river that you're afraid to cross, on the other side, you have a different view. You confront the fear and you work through it. And this is we're talking about this being in the comfort of your own home. It's a big step, and it also usually helps the child because they're like, somebody understands that I have good reasons to be afraid. Because if there's been intervention, a lot of the intervention has gone along the way of, don't worry, we've got this all under control. Shame is another feeling that's associated, because it's not being able to solve the problem. They feel ashamed of being bullied and being exposed to whatever weakness they have. And this is where you can see that's a whole mechanism. Because they're ashamed of being bullied, then they kind of avoid more and more people. And so they avoid more people. So they become less popular. So they become more vulnerable. So the bullying continues. They have a lot of negative thoughts, like, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, this is why I'm being bullied, I have no control over this. It's like, and because they're afraid and they don't want to admit, mommy, I've been being bullied for like 3 months. They've been taking my lunch every day, and that's why I'm being starving. There's good reasons to be ashamed of this. It's like awful. And so what we do with shame is we usually, and as I said, this is oversimplified for the purpose of today, but is to face it and show it instead of hiding it and avoid it. So if you have a defect, say you stutter, well, and you see this with people who stutter or people who blush. You can't control these things. So you try and control blushing, you blush more. But if somebody who stutters being bullied for stutter, the bullies are using the stuttering, they can say, oh yeah, I'm stuttering. Actually, I bet you can't stutter as well as I can. And it's just the moment they say, you can tell me I know I'm stuttering. It's really bad. I don't know what I'm going to do about this. I'm glad you're reminding me about this problem. It sends again a message of, I have no fear anymore, and it stops the bullying. The same way, and my poor son who's been the guinea pig of all of this, but our son used to tell us at some point when he would disagree, he's kind of rebellious phase, and he was like, oh, you're so mean, you're mean parents. And And obviously we try the usual things. No, we're not mean. We have to do this. It's our job. Blah, blah, blah. You know, the usual, obviously, epic fail. And so I thought, yeah, this is not working. And so I started saying, yeah, you know, you're right. We're really mean. And you know what? We're running for the meanest parent of the year contest. There's no substance to it anymore. It is the same idea. It doesn't sound logical, but it takes away the power struggle. It reverses the power struggle. An obvious one as well is sadness. You know, the moment, it's a combination of fear and sadness, and they're really sad because it really sucks. I mean, they get more and more isolated because it's not cool to be with the bullied kid. It's often hidden by the fear and the shame, but they can't share the problem with you because they know you'll intervene, and they don't want you to worry you, and they don't want you to be sad because they're not up to the standards that they think you have. You probably don't, right? But they also try to contain their emotions in front of the bully, and that usually fails because even if they go and cry in the toilet, the bully knows exactly where they are, and everybody else does. And so with sadness, what really helps children, or anyone actually, is to normalize it. It's like, well, yeah, you know, you have good reasons to cry and you have good reasons to be really depressed. I mean, this is really horrible, shitty situation. And if they say, you have to help me, mommy, you have to help me, you say, yeah, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you find a solution. You know, if it gets really bad, then you can help them with pleasant things, because they're spending all their day living in this fear of aggression, taking in the aggression, repressing all these feelings. There's no more pleasure in their life. And one way of helping them regain some strength, to help them think about little things that will make their day better. So you're not saying the bullying is going to stop tomorrow, because you don't know. And it will take, you know, depending on the situation and your child, it will take, you know, a few days to a few weeks for the thing to work through. But you can say, okay, let's think about things that you could do. And the last one isn't, you would expect bullied children to be very angry, but usually that's the last emotion that you see, because it's covered by all of this. And if you think about it, all of these fear, shame, and sadness, from an adaptation point of view, they are emotions that provoke assistance. When you're sad, people help you. When you're afraid, people help you. So it's kind of logical that these are the first things to come out. But anger usually is underneath. And if there's any anger, surprisingly, it is usually at the people who are supposed to protect me. You know, why is the teacher not doing anything? Why did you intervene? It takes them a while to be angry at the bully. And to be honest, I don't think it's a problem if they're angry at the bully. It's actually a good thing, because it will get them to do stuff. Now that we've covered all the theory, it's a good time to basically go into a case study to outline how it actually works. And I gave you some examples in this presentation, and Emmanuelle Piquet in her book has many examples. I think she has like 5 or 6 different cases, and she starts with all of them at the beginning. She sets the scene, outlines what's going on, and then she covers all what I've covered. And then at the end of the book, she basically shows you what of each of these children have done to address the situation. And so today I've chosen to take a very simple case, the case of my son, and to basically show you how it can be applied. It's obviously it's a simple case because it's in kindergarten, so children are still, the level of sophistication and social risk is limited, but it will just get you. But it's a good way of basically applying what we've just learned. So quite simply, my son is in the last year of maternelle. He's 5, and he has this friend that he's really very close to. And the two of them are the kind of boys, they meet up during the recess and they play, but they also fight a lot, but in a sort of friendly manner. They really like each other, but sometimes they like to bug each other, and sometimes they go to complain to the teacher. But since they equally complain to the teacher and doesn't seem to be a big problem, the teachers after a while basically decide, well, you know, you two deserve each other, we're not going to intervene. And I'm telling you this because it has an impact on what happened. So this is the whole year, everything was going fine, and around May time, so at the end of the year, my son comes home several days in a row, very upset, very stressed, and he starts behaving more quite nervously, starts having nightmares. It's already something's going on at school. And so far, for all the reasons I've outlined previously, we've always taken the attitude that, whatever, if he would complain about something in school, we obviously would listen to him, understand what's going on, but we would never intervene directly. We would always say, oh, do you want help? And he usually would say no. And so in this case, we applied the same approach. We said, it seems like something's bothering you. It really seems to be bugging you. This has been going on several days now. You've been complaining about your friend to us. Do you want a solution? And this time he says yes. And so we do exactly what I've just outlined. We get him to explain what was going on. So what was going on is that his friend, who probably is 15 centimeters taller than him, probably almost 10 kilos heavier, my son is quite short and slim, had decided it would be fun to basically at every recess placate him on the floor with the help of some other kids and try and remove his trousers, calling him a baby that had needed his diaper changed. So obviously that happened more than once, otherwise it wouldn't be in a case of bullying. And I then asked my son the obvious questions. So what did you do? What have you tried? And to what effect? And so he did exactly what most people would do in that situation. He obviously asked him to stop. He protested. He tried to fight back, but you can't really fight back against 3 or 4 kids when you're on your own. He tried to avoid him, so he would try and go into the playground in different classes. And when a recess would start, he would basically try and avoid him for as long as possible. But obviously the playground being not very large and kids having to stay in the playground, he would eventually catch up with him, and so this would happen. So he did exactly what we've seen in the film. He avoided, he tried to protest, he went to the teacher. And the teacher basically, as I said, had basically decided the 2 of them just deserved each other. So the teacher said, oh, I'm not interested in what's going on, just solve it yourselves. And so he basically had no help. And this is an interesting point, because you could argue this is an outrage from a teacher's perspective, but if you look at it from their perspective, they've seen these 2 boys friendly fighting all year round. So to them, it just looks like another little fight, and they might not be realizing, or I don't know whether, at some point some of them might just say, okay, this is the way it is. In any case, so he was avoiding, he was protesting, he was complaining and trying to get adult intervention, which was declined. And so he was basically going in there thinking this is going to happen now. So what we did in terms of U-turn, we basically said, okay, you need to go from you have no control into you have much more control. So what you're going to do is tomorrow, you're going to have to start this tomorrow, because this can't go on. I mean, you obviously want a solution. Yes. You're obviously scared of going to school. Yes. You're very upset about this. Yes. We validated all his feelings, as we've mentioned. And we said to him, well, basically what you have to do is tomorrow, recess rings. You have to make sure you find your friend before he finds you. So you have to be faster than him. You find him, you go into the playground, you look for him, you say hello to him in a normal manner, and then you say to him, okay, how are you today? Maybe you should change my diaper right away. Let's get it done and over with, and then we can go and play. And my son just looks at me like I'm crazy, like, well, Mom, I can't do that because he's going to do it. Then I said to him, okay, he might do it, but he's doing it anyway. So you have a choice. You decide when he does it, or he decides when he does it with the help of others. Which one do you prefer? With the chance that he doesn't do it. But you notice that I never said to him he's not going to do it because my ploy will work, because I don't know that. It's very likely, but sometimes it needs repeat. It doesn't solve itself in 3 seconds. And so he goes, well, maybe. I said, well, to be honest, it's going to happen anyway. So we have to figure out what works. Let's try this. If it doesn't work, we'll readjust. Worst case scenario is basically as it is already. And so he says, fine. So we kind of rehearse what he has to say. And it's very simple. He basically has to come up to him as fast as possible, because he has to lead. So this is the idea of, going from no control to much more control, and from avoiding to seeking out. And he has to ask him, please continue. But obviously, by doing this, he's sending another message, which is, well, I'm not worried anymore. I'm not scared anymore. You can do it if you want. And obviously that takes away most of the fun, because from a bully's perspective, and I mean, as I said, these are small children. They're still learning about relationships. They're still learning about social interactions. So these two were really good friends. He tried something which was entertaining, so he continued. And my son wasn't as effective as he could be at telling him no, because my son tends to want friends, whatever the cost. So he's vulnerable. And so basically asking him to continue with the posture of seeking somebody out changes completely the interaction. And so that means that effectively, instead of asking for help from the teacher, from other kids, he owns the solution and he fixes it. And so, did it work? It did. I saw my son the next day. So he was instructed to do this at the 2 recess that he had, so in the morning and the afternoon. And I told him, it's very important you do this every time. It's like medication. You have to continue, probably for a couple of days. So he did this the first day. First day, obviously, I was very eager to find out how it went. And he said, Mum, you won't believe this. Well, I tried to, look surprised. And he said, well, I said, okay, what did you do? And he did exactly that. He went to his friend, and he didn't really say the word, how we rehearsed it, but he basically said, hi, annoy me, please. And so his friend looked at him extremely confused, and he didn't annoy him, and they played. And then he did it again in the afternoon, and the other kid didn't do it either, and they played. And then I said, okay, that's fine, but you have to continue this a couple of days, because otherwise, he might not take this as serious business, and the interactions basically have to reset. So they have to find another equilibrium. And so he did this, I think, in total of 3 days. The only thing that I didn't think about is that there was an unexpected development, which was, in a way, it was quite entertaining. The other child was so surprised by this behavior of my son, is that at some point it was kind of, messing with his head. So he went to the teacher. He said he complained to the teacher that my son was asking him to annoy him. So obviously the teacher thought that was very strange. She ended up calling me and asking me all about it. So obviously claimed that I knew nothing about it, and I would talk to my son about this. But that was the end of this. After this episode, they went back to being friends, and that was never an issue again. And I know that afterwards my son sometimes remembers this, and sometimes he knows that this can be used. I think he has spoken about this to one of his friends. And that doesn't mean he doesn't remain probably more vulnerable than others, but at least he's learned, he had one experience where we helped him with specific tactics. And so he's learned that basically when you have a problem in school, it is possible to get help from your parents, but you can fix it yourself, because he's the one who was in the playground. And he was quite young, so obviously the older the child, the easier it is to get them engaged in this. And you obviously, it's a slightly different relationship with a 5-year-old than it is with a 10-year-old than it is with a 14-year-old, and obviously the situation you're dealing with tends to be more complex. In summary, before we finish, the key points about everything today is popularity is obviously something you can't get away from, but basically be aware that too much pressure on popularity can, in some cases, put your child at greater risk of bullying. But as I said, it's a combination of context, of interactions, of the popularity pressure that your child is imposing on himself or herself, and the social, and whether they are already socially isolated or not, and how good they are at interpersonal skills, because effectively that's what it boils down to. In any case, whatever the situation, give your child plenty of opportunities to train their interpersonal skills in many contexts, starting at home. The more exposure they have to different situations, to different kinds of people, to different way of interacting, well, the better they will be honing their interpersonal skills. And again, when they are in those situations, try not to intervene. You can pull them apart if there's something going on and just tell them what you think you could do, or what about this, and try and get them to really remain active in this process, because they have to learn themselves to trial and error, what works, what doesn't work. So don't intervene too prematurely, even if you have obviously their best interest at heart, but try to get them to learn something from every interpersonal relation they're getting. That's really a good form of prevention. In general, when it comes to all relationships, be available to your child as a coach instead of a fixer, which goes back to the intervention. That doesn't mean sometimes you don't intervene, it's what I've mentioned before, but if you have the possibility of sitting back, maybe observing, and then giving them friendly feedback, or asking them first, what did you think about that, or would you like to have can I give you a tip about how to do it differently? And if they don't, drop it. I mean, the purpose is not for you to constantly observe what they're doing and to interrupt them and to constantly trying to fix, to give them input, because that's again driving the message of you can't do this. Only provide advice and support if they have a problem. And children don't necessarily view what we view as a problem. So sometimes kids will fight and be mean to each other. We feel horrified, but they say, oh, he's my friend. That's the way we are. So it's really a difference. And I mean, you can intervene, but you have to realize that if for them it's not a problem, whatever you tell them, it's unlikely that it works. So pick your battles basically and focus on where the pain points are for your child. And so if, and I don't wish it on anyone, your child is in the situation that he or she is being bullied, then you have basically all the steps to follow to use this interpersonal judo to U-turn against the bully. Make sure that you get as much information as possible. If you don't have enough information at the time that you have the discussion, and you really, it's very fuzzy, because some kids don't remember very much, and if you say, what did he say when he said this, and he goes, I don't know, and they say, I don't know too many things, then basically you have to tell them, okay, so you're not ready yet, and we don't have enough information to develop a really good weapon. So what you need to do tomorrow is, when you go into school, I want you to be like a detective, or like an anthropologist, or like a journalist, or whatever ninja, or whatever you make up that fits your child, and I want you to watch what they're doing, what you say, basically, so that you can tell me about it tomorrow night in a way that I can see it as if I was watching a cartoon or a film. So the more detail I have, the better it is. And if you can't, just give me one example of the day, and we'll work with that, and we'll do this several days in a row until we have enough precise information. I know that when you have tools and you want to help, you want to jump right in, but in cases like this, if it's not specific enough and the weapon isn't specific enough, then it's better to actually take more time, because your child will be more confident if whatever they have to do or say, and it's usually a combination of doing and saying, if it's adjusted to the bully, it will be more potent and they will be more confident. And usually they will tell you if it isn't. They'll say, no, that's not going to work. If you don't have enough information, they will basically object to a lot of what you're saying. And in cases like this, just say, okay, I understand. Basically, we're not ready yet. You have to go and get more information for me. And what is interesting about this is that taking time has value, because just for them to go out and be in that relationship, but as an information seeker, as opposed to just as somebody who's sitting in the situation, already changes their posture. And it might already adjust what the bully is doing, or it might not. But in many cases, just the fact that they're changing the way they deal with the situation can induce some change. And so it's taking time and then trying out a U-turn. And if that doesn't work, reassessing, and always taking the failure on yourself. You will not be able to have them use their weapon if you haven't helped them face their fear or their shame and or their sadness. Because if they're too afraid and you haven't gone with them to what would happen if, the fear will paralyze them. So there's actually quite a lot of preparation to do this before they can, at least you can decide collectively that he or she is ready to use the weapon. And as Emmanuelle Piquet said in her book, 50% of children never have to use it, because it just working through the emotions and realizing that there is a way out and that they own a way out and that there is something they can do and they have something in their back pocket just completely changes their posture and just stops the bullying. And hopefully that's what happens in most cases. But obviously, it is much easier to say than to do, because when it's your child, you have a lot of emotions, you have a lot of anger, you are worried, you want it to go away. So another way is obviously going to see somebody who's a professional and who can help you and your child find an adjusted solution, which is what Emmanuelle Piquet does and what I do as myself. Before we go, I wanted to talk about cyberbullying, because it's something a lot of people talk about. Basically, cyberbullying works the same. The problem, the major difference between cyberbullying and bullying is that there is a greater loss of control for the bullied child, because once something goes on Facebook, on Instagram or whatever, it goes extremely quickly and it goes to a lot of people instantly. So it's the same mechanisms, but the content can be worse because it remains and it's more sophisticated. The same report says that 60% of bullied child are bullied offline and online, but interestingly, 60% of bullies are bullied online. So there's like a role reversal linked to the medium. So everybody can be affected by cyberbullying, but basically the approach is exactly the same. In her book, Emmanuelle Piquet has an example of a kid where he's bullied. They've created a page about himself, and they mock him all day on the page. And she gets him, obviously she works with him on this, but she gets him to basically ask to become the owner of the group. And he basically goes up to the children set up the teenagers who set up the group and tells them, well, since this group is all about me, I want to make sure you have very precise information about me. So I think I should become president, and I should be the one that vets whatever criticism of me goes online. Well, needless to say, the group was dissolved within 24 hours. And there was an example in real life. Another example, which is completely unrelated to Emmanuelle, of an American, I think it was an American teenager who ended up being mocked by her friends because she had a photo on Facebook where she looked like she was naked, or her bottom was too big. And so what she did is effectively a U-turn. She basically posted on the same pages a bigger picture of her bottom, saying, well, since you're all talking about my bottom, I think you should really look at it more closely. And it stopped immediately. Why? Because she made a U-turn. She effectively told them, well, okay, fine, go ahead. Here's the stuff. And so there's no more power struggle. There's no more interest. It's no fun for the bully because she's not afraid, and she's not afraid to lose anything. And so that went away. Before we move to the Q&A, I wanted to show you an example of an effective way of dealing with a bully. It is a third party intervening on behalf of somebody, but it's really interesting because it really shows what just words can do to a relationship. Thank you.
Joking, dude. Stan. I hate that guy. Is that the guy who taped you to the toilet? Yeah. Yesterday he shoved me in a washing machine in my own house. What was that jerk doing at your house? It's Maggie's boyfriend. Maggie has a boyfriend? Well, I'm very disappointed in your sister. He's looking. Don't make eye contact. He's kind of temperamental, and you're looking. I'll look at it. Stop it.
Hey, Twinkle Douche. If I wanted you in the cafeteria, I would have taped you to a lunch lady.
You little punk. You don't talk to him that way.
Yeah? What are you gonna do?
What am I gonna do? First, I'm gonna call your father. Heads up! Give me my ball back, bitch. You know, Stan, I feel sorry for you.
You don't know me.
Oh, but I do. All too well. You're the man. Captain of the basketball team. Dates the pretty girls. High school is your kingdom. But people, Stan's a bully. Why? It'd be way too easy to say Stan preys on the weak simply because he's a dick. No. Stan here is much more complex than that. See, according to leading psychiatrists, Stan's a bully for one of three reasons. One, underneath all of that male bravado, there's an insecure little girl just banging on the closet door trying to get out. Two, like a caveman, Stan's brain is underdeveloped. Therefore, Stan is unable to use self-control, and so he acts out aggressively. And the third reason, Stan has a small wiener. Don't hurt yourself, big boy.